Hello again, friends. We're here. We're doing some alchemy. We got us a lot of stuff. I think this is like almost 10 mil of alks or something. I'm not sure what it is in total. I'll let you know when I get through it. Not really. You'll just see it in my bank at some point. But yeah. And this is always fun. Today, we're just gonna relax. You know, I might do another like 5 CG or something just because who doesn't like struggling? I love struggling. But yeah, so we've got all of these stuff to alk. Rune halberds. Wow! Yahoo! Do. But yeah. So anyways, I thought today I would talk about what they took from us. So there's this image macro that relates to like a pre-Twin Towers sort of America, right? We're talking pre-9/11, I should say, not pre-Twin Towers. That would be a little older than what I'm referencing, but you know, there's a lot of these images, and they come back to this feel of what did we lose when we lost America? Because let's be clear here, America is lost. There is no recovery from this. There is no coming back. It's effectively over, and there's no reason to delude ourselves into thinking otherwise. Like, things are not going to repair themselves at any point in time. And so, you know, let's take a second and let's recap what exactly we lost. So, what did as someone who grew up in the 90s, what was 90s America like? I can remember a distinct cultural shift. Like, the 80s was this materialistic, you know, haven where all that mattered was dollar bills, and that's how people behaved in the 80s. You know, that's what the 80s was all about. Uh-oh. Really? That's considered valuable? I'm just gonna do this instead of trying to do that well. Yeah. Yep, and there you go. Alright. Back to our ledgers. So anyways, as I was saying, so the 80s was all about materialism, right? It was all about dollar bills, and then comes the 90s, which the 90s is like a distinct shift, and I would call it like almost depression. Like, the 90s brought us like this grunge culture, this, you know, sort of dark underbelly where these like horrible themes became the norm. If you ever talk to a lot of 90s people, they in general enjoy like really dark stuff. This is where goth subculture and all of that came from, right? So this is like where the formation of a lot of these ideas all originated. Is, you know, this is all like before pretty much the defining moment for America in the 21st century, or, you know, the Twin Tower, or 9/11 basically, and what happened there. So as individuals that grew up in that period, like, things back then were exceptionally, you know, dark in the media, and people accepted a lot of these grotesque ideas as like natural, like drug use and drug discussion, and the negative implications of all this came to light. You know, it was a pretty frequent topic of discussion, like the war on drugs, etc. And that's what the culture was like in the 90s. And then as we progress into, you know, basically 9/11, we have this sort of Americana that a lot of people remember, you know, the great United States and what it was and what it became. And so what was thrown away, though, with those two buildings and America's pride and, like, the sanity or whatever remained of it, of this country? So what did America represent? When people talk about, like, white culture, or that America doesn't have a culture, you know, they're just factually wrong. Sure, there were, you know, immigrants and all that, but America is basically... I think my father actually put this really well. He said that Americans, because he was born in Europe, so he had a direct contrast between European Caucasians and America. Americans are like John Wayne, basically, and that's what we lost. America was you know, this idea of, screw you, I do what I want, and, you know, get off my property, I have a rifle. That's the basic American idea, is, you know, I shoot you, we have these, you know, duels, these honorable combats. You know, it's just this whole mental mindset that I don't think a lot of Europeans get. Like, for instance, another great example of this is, like, keep your rifle by your side, right? This, like, Ubisoft releases some woke thing that they think is going, you know, to be a secret bash on like religious fundamentalists, and then they just turn it around and they turn it into another Yankee Doodle Dee, where the song that's supposed to be an insult is turning into a free battle hymn. And that's really what America is all about. It's embracing this sort of culture of, screw you, I do what I want. Like, this country was founded on, basically not wanting to pay taxes, right? And, we're literally going to die for something like that. And then America sort of lost that standoffishness. Like, it's a weird trend, but it's like Americans are very, compared to the rest of the world, extremely friendly, extremely talkative, especially out on the street. Like, as an introvert, it's very difficult to avoid conversation when walking down the street in America. Like, it'll come at you if you're not ready. And so you have to be prepared, obviously, as an introvert in America. Maybe not so much in the rest of the world, but out here in these parts, especially growing up in the areas around Appalachia with, cotton mouth or meth mouth people, as it would say. The meth mouths are like the Mountain Dew mouth or whatever you have. You don't want to talk to those people, but they definitely want to talk to you. And this idea of, this strong family unit and defending your territory and, existing in a state with nature, which is something else that used to be American and now is lost. Like, as far as just this connection with nature, this connection with the wild. Like, they called it the Wild West, not just because of how lawless it was, but because of, how natural a lot of the things were. All of that just went away. Like, America is one of the few places in the world that has a lot of natural beauty that still remain undisturbed. Like, in Europe, a lot of it has been, fully renovated, and they have their own man-made beauties, right? And, America just per capita has a lot of this just natural reserves even today in comparison to the rest of the world. Like, the amount of space per American is just much better than most places in the world. Like, we have so much space for only like 300-something million people, right? And so, those are, and we've lost like a lot of those factors that built us. And then there's also American culture, which was lost in 9/11 and replaced with this woke communist color revolution, and that seeks to subvert and destroy it. And it's destroyed it. It's pretty much over. But America was basically founded on the genus of the nuclear family, right? And founded on strict religious fundamental teachings. And you can say, you're against all that, but America is basically a representation of Judeo-Christian values. It's a representation of Western culture. Well, was. It's not anymore. And a representation of that in connection with nature and isolationism. Like, when America lost its isolationism during, the First World War and that period, as soon as women got the vote, basically, right, the 19th Amendment, when they could start voting for other people to go die in foreign wars. Like, we lost something truly impactful in the world in that moment. And, I hope the next iteration of America after the Great Collapse that's coming somehow reclaims that isolationist spirit. That isolationist standoff, like, I'm John, Heck, and Wayne sort of opinion that the average American used to have. A lot of people will say that cultures don't have, like, their own distinct people, and people don't have their own distinct, like, differences. Everyone's just the same. We're all, biological machines. And while that might be true on some, like, level, depending on where you're at and what you've learned, you're programmed to act and react and be different. And so, when you lose that and when you give up on that ideal, you have this degradation and this, like, just longingless, nihilism that's taken over. And you could kind of see the start of this nihilism in the 90s with, like, goth, grunge, and rock, and the continued depreciation of American culture in the 80s when it reverted to materialism. And, you could even say it begins with the importation of African-American music and culture with, like, the Beatles, etc., and the degrading decline of American ecosystems. And all of that can be factors of it, but it's just this main communist push to destroy, that was successful, that destroyed the isolationism and the, free spirit of Americans. Like, Americans as a people now are broken. You can see it. Everyone's exhausted. You can literally feel it in the atmosphere that this can't continue, that this won't continue. And so everyone knows it, and no one is going to say anything about it, probably because they're too scared or whatever, because, the thought of, this happening is obviously not good. But it's an uncomfortable reality that that's the trajectory we're heading on, is some sort of massive economic, full-on sort of shift or paradigm destruction. And whatever happens at the end of that is anyone's guess. Like, this is geopolitics on an unheard of scale. Like, no one could have predicted the Third Reich, for instance, even though people said that, there would be some kind of strongman or, something that happens around that. Like, very vague predictions, but no one predicted what the final form would look like and where it would come from. And I mean, a lot of people would predict, I would imagine, if they were being honest, like a full communist takeover of America. And, that might happen. That might be true. But we'll see where it goes from there. And yeah. So I'm hoping at least that we can reclaim that isolationist, heck off, I do what I want sort of attitude whenever the collapse does come and we have to rebuild everything. I'm not too hopeful, though. I think at the end of the day, the Marxists did destroy the culture successfully. There's nothing really to fight for, so anyone who would want to reclaim that won't be interested in it, and it'll just be lost to time. And much like Judeo-Christian values, after they get lost in the West and East, will be lost to time, and the human race will turn into some sort of like Chinese bug communist hive mind, which, maybe that's more efficient. Maybe that's the way it should be in the end. It's a depressing thought, and it's a little disgusting, but that is the times we live in the future. I at least got to live at least a little bit in the good times then. I think I was born at like the best possible time. I got to experience the internet. I got to experience, goth and grunge culture and all of these little motifs right before they're, were lost to the winds forever. So I'm very thankful that I got to at least live in a time like this. Maybe I'll get to avoid the collapse, at least the negative aspects of it too, and wherever I end up or go. I don't know how this pans out. As far as long-term futures, I just know I'm training agility. I'm getting some fat stacks, and then I'll figure things out from there. I hope you have a plan, or are thinking of a plan. Have a good day. Peace, friends.